TTC passengers stranded for 20 minutes during the morning rush hour. We'll hear from the public transit CEO about why all of Line 1 went down.
25% tariff threats on Canadian goods, disparaging words about Canada being the 51st state. The Prime Minister and premiers, they're meeting right now to respond.
And stealing electricity, illegal drug operation happening below the streets of Hamilton. Mayor Andrea Horvath responds.
This is Live at 5. Good evening. I'm Bakari Savage.
And I'm Lena Latifat. Thank you for joining us on Live at 5. The TTC is citing a software issue for signal problems that have disrupted subway service on Line 1 multiple times over the past 2 weeks.
CP24's Phil Perkins joins us live with more on what the head of the transit agency had to say today. Phil, you were there asking questions yourself.
Yeah, Bakari and Lena, as someone who takes the subway a good amount of time during the week, it was definitely a huge concern for people who rely on the TTC, specifically Line 1, from Vaughan all the way around the loop, all the way up to Finch to get to work, get to school, get to some important appointments. That was shut down during the rush hour because of a signal problem. It is run by a new software for the last 18 months, and for some reason it has been faulty. Not just today during rush hour, but last night, Monday, and last Wednesday, and millions of people rely on the TTC, over 1 million rely on the TTC every single day, and they were then squished into shuttle buses along Line 1 to get to where they need to go. And we heard from TTC interim CEO Greg Percy saying that it's a software issue that controls these signals, and apparently they have a kill switch in them, that once the signals are off, no subways are moving. It is a safety feature, and he says in a weird way, and a silver lining, at least that is working. Subways aren't riding on these tracks blind. Here's what he had to say, along with a member of the riders advocacy group, TTC Riders, about the latest string of issues with the TTC.
The common thread is that the failures are a result of something we're trying to investigate and understand. But the symptom is the service stops while the signal system technically goes into fail-safe position. We will not run trains if the signal system isn't working. So the signal system isn't working, we stop until we get it rebooted, and that's what this is all about. You have computers at home, they fail, you have to reboot them. Make that on a network system basis, that's what we're dealing with.
Every time you get on, it feels like you're taking a gamble about whether you'll actually make it to where you need to go on time, and that's a huge problem because, the TTC is struggling to win riders back after the pandemic, and this is not helping. It's driving people away, and the TTC relies so much on transit riders' fare revenue for the operating budget that they can't afford to see more riders choose another option because they can't rely on the TTC.
Well, actually, according to CP24, we heard from the TTC back in September, and they said ridership was actually up the highest amount post-pandemic. 2.66 million people rode the TTC per day back in September. That is a post-pandemic high. I don't know what the numbers are the last couple of months, October, November, but that'll be interesting to see what those numbers are given the last couple of days where we've had some serious delays, people trying to get to work. Back to you guys.
All right, Phil Perkins reporting live. Thank you, Phil. Well, a Toronto cycling group is launching legal action over the Ford government's plan to remove bike lanes from some major roads in the city.
Okay, for more of this, let's go live to CP24, Sija Liu. Sija.
Hi, Bakari and Lena. Well, I'm standing here on Bloor Street right now, which is one of the 3 major roads in Toronto where the Ford government plans to remove bike lanes. And now this battle over bike lanes going to a next step, a legal challenge, like you mentioned, by this cycling advocacy group, Cycling Toronto, which is now seeking an injunction to prevent the government from removing bike lanes from here on Bloor Street, Yonge Street, as well as University Avenue. They say the new law, Bill 212, infringes on their charter rights to life and security for bike riders. They would like to seek an injunction to stop the removal of these lanes. Now, if you'll recall, Bill 212 would also require municipalities to ask the province for permission to install bike lanes that would also take away a lane of traffic. Premier Doug Ford defended this plan, saying it will help tackle traffic gridlock in the city, and said cyclists could use other roads across the city, like secondary roads. And we've been here on Bloor Street the last couple of hours. Most of the riders that we're seeing are delivery food workers. The group Cycling Toronto says this is a major group of people that will be affected as well. And we spoke to cyclists traveling here on Bloor Street today. Here's what they had to say about this latest legal challenge.
I don't think it's a good plan. There's a lot of businesses that are going to be impacted, by the lack of foot traffic caused by, assuming that they're also going to take out the parking lanes alongside the bike lanes, and obviously safety for cyclists, but those don't seem to be concerns that we're looking at.
It certainly impacts my ability to get to work safely. I commute an hour or 10 across the city every day, and it really enables me to get my exercise and to get to work in a timely manner. So I really don't think it's a good idea.
I will feel less safe, absolutely. I stick to the bike lanes now. They are the safest way. But, we're not going anywhere, and it is the way of the future.
And now there's also the argument of businesses, with some business owners not being too happy about bike lanes, saying their business revenue is down. So Lena Macari, a lot of different opinions on this, but the latest in this battle is this legal challenge.
Okay, lots of perspectives, that's for sure. Sija, thank you for this. It's now 5:06, sitting at 2 degrees tonight. Let's get a check on that commute with CP24's traffic specialist, Adjoa and Yabwa. Hey, Adj.
Hey, Lena. Yeah, it has been a busy afternoon, and we are dealing with a jammed-up drive. If your travels take you towards the westbound lanes of the Gardner, it's actually a lot busier as you make your way out of the downtown core. Has to do with the lane restrictions, but also problems that they just blacked out the camera. But on the westbound Gardner, as you make your way through Spadina, some police activity is in the right lane. Fire arrived on scene. I'm getting word that they're going to block an additional lane. So if you're looking for those all-important alternatives, the Lakeshore appears to be a good one. On to the DVP, also a sea of brake lights, but no issues. Delays extend as you head from Dundas right on through to the 401, and still a busy go on the 401 at this hour as you try to get home across the top of the city. You're looking at delays through the area. We are dealing with a problem if you're traveling on city streets on Eglinton. It's right at Brentcliffe. I'll send it back to you both.
This CP24 traffic report is brought to you by 407 ETR. Enjoy the journey with a stress-free commute.
The Toronto Police Caring and Safe School Community. It was at an Etobicoke High School today after a shot was fired inside.
The gunfire happened at Silverthorne Collegiate Institute on Mill Road near Burnham Thorpe at around 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. Officers were called for reports of a firearm discharge in a stairwell. They found evidence of a shot being fired, but 2 suspects had already left the area. No injuries were reported. The incident left some students rattled.
I thought it was fake for a while, honestly. And then when I found out it was real, I was still really confused.
I think I'm a bit nervous, but knowing that there's police officers, as Sam said, I think I feel fine.
I just heard people screaming and stuff.
You heard screaming?
Yeah, from my friends.
What did you think? Did you know what was going on?
I was scared.
Well, the school was placed in lockdown as there were about 120 people inside.
Well, a surprising discovery in Hamilton Park, a series of holes and tunnels that were part of a system to supply electricity to an encampment.
CP24's Linda Biscaya joins us live from the newsroom with details of the story. Lindsay.
Yeah, this was found, Lena and Bakari, when police just happened to be patrolling this encampment in Gage Park in downtown Hamilton. Quite a large park as well, and this encampment is relatively new, but that's when they found this kind of, as you mentioned, labyrinth of tunnels and holes connecting all together underneath the encampment, really connecting tents to generators, and those wires went on to connect to basically the city's supply of power in one section, so essentially stealing power from the city of Hamilton. So really quite an operation happening here. Police have since found and arrested one male that they say was responsible for digging these holes and tunnels. He was also found with quite a large amount of fentanyl on him, so he's been arrested and charged with a number of different charges in that regard as well. But police are still continuing to investigate this. You can see here some of these tunnels and holes actually were about 7 feet deep, so not a small operation by any means. And of course, all these wires really connecting here, which could have been quite dangerous. So we did hear from electrical officials today that we're also examining this. Here's more.
They tried to splice into the power because obviously they want to charge their phones and have power at night or whatnot. But it only comes on at night because it is on a pole. Yeah.
So when the light came on at night, they would have had a power.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Did it work?
It did work for a bit, but as we're inspecting right now,
they got some burnt up wiring.
Yeah,
the faulty connection.
It's a hazard.
So we have been speaking as well with people who were also in that encampment. Many of them said that they knew about the tunnels to some extent, but they weren't involved. Here's more from some of the people in the encampment.
I guess he took off on foot when the cops came to question him about it. But yeah, I don't know, we filled it all in today. It took us like a good couple hours to do it. So, and then, but I guess they said something about a generator, but I think he spliced into the wires over there. But I know that we're running my generator. I have a generator over there, and it's supplying them with power. But there's another group over there that was jumping into my generator, and they keep on tripping the switches, so I had to unplug them.
So police still investigating. It's not clear yet, Lena and Bakari, how much in damage this is actually going to cost the city, but police asking anyone with any information to contact them. Back to you.
All right, Lindsay, thanks so much for this. Also, over the weekend, Hamilton police say they also shut down a drug dealing operation that was occurring on a discrete trail near Lincoln and Barton Streets.
Police say that the shack was known to drug traffickers. During the investigation, police seized fentanyl, methamphetamine, a replica pistol, and ammunition. 2 males were charged with drug and weapons possession.
It is 5:11, 2 degrees tonight. You're watching Live at 5 on Toronto's breaking news, CP24.
And up next, the Bank of Canada lowered its key interest rate by 0.5 percentage point today, but signaled a slower pace of rate cuts moving forward. Canada Post and the union representing postal workers, they're in a war of words as the countrywide strike enters its 27th day.
Yeah, it's almost been a month. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers is pushing back against recent criticism from Canada Post. The union says its latest proposals include wage increases lower than previously demanded, as well as a cost of living allowance and better job security. Federal mediation was paused 2 weeks ago, and calls for government intervention from the business community have so far been rebuffed. Meanwhile, the postal strike also means passports are not being delivered, and that is leaving many travelers in limbo.
I sent it in in August, and I was like, hey, I'm traveling and maybe I should call. And they said they transferred it here so I could come get it printed here.
I do not have it because I have to go back and do it all over again.
The line itself is fine, but when you wait for somebody to see you, it was disaster.
And Service Canada says it's currently holding 185,000 passports because of the postal strike.
Now, a statement from Canada Post reads in part, Canada Post has carefully reviewed the latest offers from the Canadian Union of Postal Workers and determined that the union's demands are unaffordable and unsustainable, adding billions of dollars in long-term fixed costs. Added up, all the demands in CUPW's latest offers would cost more than $3 billion over 4 years, at a time when the Postal Service is already recording large financial losses. The union's demands would also further reinforce the status quo when the Postal Service must transform to meet the changing needs of Canadians and businesses.
Well, borrowing costs, they're moving lower after another rate cut by the Bank of Canada.
The central bank reduced its key policy rate by 50 basis points, bringing it to 3.25%. It's the fifth straight cut after years of increases. The bank indicated that further cuts would be more gradual, shifting from its previous messaging that continuous easing was needed to support economic growth. And Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem explained today's rate decision and what he's keeping an eye on moving forward.
CPI inflation has been about 2% since the summer, and we expect it to be close to target on average over the next couple of years. We thought elevated shelter price inflation would continue to ease, and it has. And the downward pressure on inflation from goods prices has also moderated as predicted. We expect the GST holiday to temporarily lower inflation to around 1.5% in January, but that effect will unwind after the GST break ends in mid-February.
A financial advisor, Alan Small, joined us with more on what today's decision means for borrowers.
The Bank of Canada has to be very careful. On one side, they're balancing a 6.8% unemployment rate, which is definitely a lot higher than it was.
Up from 6.5.
Right. It's a lot higher than it's been for quite some time. We're seeing GDP growth, basically non-growth, just above 1% on a per capita basis, the lowest out of all G7 nations. But on the other side, you're looking at our dollar weakening significantly versus the U.S. dollar, and with that, the effects of that on our economy. So a lot of things to balance for Tiff Macklem and the Bank of Canada.
And the country's big banks are also lowering their lending rates to match the decrease from the Bank of Canada. All are dropping their prime rates from 5.95% to 5.45%. The changes take effect tomorrow.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is meeting virtually with Premier Doug Ford and other provincial leaders this afternoon to discuss tariffs threatened by incoming U.S. President Donald Trump. We are expecting to hear from the Premier this hour.
CP24's Beatrice Vaisman joins us live from Queen's Park. Beatrice, you've been there for hours. Let's talk about this. Give us an update.
Yeah, the waiting game continues, Bakari and Lena, because behind that door behind me is Doug Ford's office. It's inside that office that this virtual meeting is happening. The Premier on the line with the other premiers from across the country, plus Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. You might notice the flags behind me here as well. You've got the Canadian flag, the American flag, and the Ontario flag. And ultimately, the Premier is saying, hey, Ontario needs a seat at the table to take a Team Canada approach to dealing with the incoming president. And here's a bit of what Premier Doug Ford had to say as he was walking into Queen's Park this morning.
It's a Team Canada effort. The Prime Minister is the Prime Minister. He needs to lead the negotiations, but we do need to be involved, all the premiers. We need a seat at the table.
So this is actually the second meeting between premiers and the Prime Minister. The first meeting happened when Donald Trump first threatened a 25% tariff on all Canadian imports into the United States. In that meeting, the premiers essentially called for the Prime Minister to come up with an action plan. How are you going to deal with it? What's your rebuttal going to be? And how can we try to stop these 25% tariffs from being imposed on Canadian imports? Of course, it would have a devastating impact on various industries across the country. We've seen Doug Ford on American news networks the last 24 hours. He's on Fox News, on CNBC. In fact, he said, hey, Donald Trump, if you've got a few minutes, I can fly down to Mar-a-Lago myself and have a conversation with you. The Premier's focus is twofold. One, securing the U.S.-Mexico border to stop drugs and guns from coming from Mexico through the U.S. into Canada. That's something that Donald Trump has also talked about. And secondly, he wants bolstered support for CBSA, namely getting some of these border officers out on vessels to patrol our waterways and the borders from there. As for opposition leaders, rarely do you hear opposition leaders agreeing with Doug Ford and actually cheering him on, but that's what Mike Schreiner did today. And here's a bit of what he had to say.
I'm fine if the Premier is going to be on Fox News because we need to have a Team Canada approach. What I would say to the Premier, though, is don't panic. Don't go rogue and start negotiating in public like he has previous to this, because we need to be united across jurisdictional lines, across party lines to have a full Team Canada approach. And so, Premier, don't go rogue, but keep fighting for Ontario.
And so here we now know the meeting's been ongoing for an hour and 20 minutes now, again, in the Premier's office. Directly behind me, we are hearing that it's set to wrap up in the next 10 minutes or so. After that is when Doug Ford's going to come out and talk to us about how that meeting went. Back to you guys.
All right, CP24's Beatrice Vaisman live at Queen's Park. We'll be checking back in with you, but right now it's 5:20, feeling more like 3 below zero outside. This is Live at 5.
Coming up, the city has unveiled the locations of 6 new future shelters to help people living with homelessness.
Well, the city announced the sites of 6 new shelters today as part of a new 10-year strategy to build shelters citywide.
Let's bring in CP24's Andrew Brennan for all the details. And this is part of a 10-year strategy, Andrew.
Yeah, Lena Bakari, it's something that we knew about one.
Drive home is definitely heating up. We are dealing with the vehicle.
Were announced, the first 2 set to start.
We can hear you now, Andrew. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Well, we don't want to wait too people, and we will have to wait to get at least all 6 of these shelters out there. But just getting back on topic here, there is a 10-year plan. It was started by city staff, and now there's the announcement of where most of these locations will be. The first one will be offering services for youth, about 50 spaces there. It'll be on St. Clair, that opening in 2027, another opening that year as well. And then following that, between 2028 and 2030, there will be another 4 that will open. You can see the addresses on your screen now. But there is a little bit of a difference in terms of the approach right now, because let's not forget, as part of this 10-year plan, the city is gradually going to be phasing out temporary shelter services and locations, or at least that is still the plan. And these are going to be taking up a brunt of those spaces and add roughly 1,600 between now and 9 years from now. Here's more from the head of encampment services and also looking at shelters, Gord Tanner with the City of Toronto.
These smaller sites will be designed for about 80 people or less each. They'll promote safety, comfort, and prepare residents for independent living. The model is also more cost-effective compared to some of our current programs. So our shelter hotel programs, for example. These purchased and custom-built sites will save about $120 or more per day per person. And over 20 years, each shelter site could save the city about $70 million.
Said, as I mentioned before, the earliest of these shelters that is set to open is 2027. They will not be ready, of course, for this winter. Demand is expected to be even higher this year than last year. And the latest numbers we have, by the way, Lena Bakari, is that even in the fall, when it's not too cold, over 200 people on average were being turned away from Toronto shelters on any given night in October. Back to you both.
All right, the latest on shelters from CP24's Andrew Brennan joining us live from the newsroom. Thank you, Andrew. Right now, it is 5:25, feeling like -2 outside. This is Live at 5.
Police are searching for Roxy, a chocolate lab that was inside a vehicle stolen in Etobicoke this morning. That story is coming up. Welcome back. Police are asking for help tracking down a suspect after a vehicle with a dog inside was stolen in Etobicoke.
Okay, here's a look at the dog. This is Roxy, a 4-year-old chocolate lab. Police say she was inside a white Jeep Grand Cherokee, similar to this one. It was stolen near Bloor and the 427 shortly before 9 o'clock this morning. The stolen Jeep has the Ontario license plate Charlie Victor Romeo Bravo 054. This father says that he had just dropped his daughter off at school and was exiting the parking lot when a man came up to his window, made threats, and then demanded his keys.
I've kind of thought about this, like if this type of situation ever happened before, and I'd always known, like I'm not gonna, unless my kids were in the car or if I had remembered that my dog was in the car, like I'm not gonna put up a fight or anything. There was no point. So no, I didn't really panic. I just grabbed my phone, grabbed a couple things, and said like, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, horrible. The suspect is described as a white man, around 30 years old, with a medium build, 5'8" to 6 feet tall, with a light-colored beard. black jacket, black pants, and black earmuffs. If you have any information, get in touch.
Right now it's 5:29, holding at 2 above zero. This is Live at 5.
And we're live inside Queen's Park tonight, where Premier Doug Ford is meeting virtually with the Prime Minister and other Canadian premiers to discuss Donald Trump's tariff threat. He's expected to address the media any minute now. Stay with us.
Okay, TTC passengers stranded for 20 minutes during the morning rush. We'll hear from the public transit CEO about why all of Line 1 went down.
Stealing the electricity, illegal drug operation happening below the streets of Hamilton. Andrea Horvath responds.
This is Live at 5.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lena Latifa.
I'm Bakari Savage. A Toronto cycling group is launching legal action over the Ford government's plan to remove bike lanes from some major roads in the city.
For more on this, we're live to CP24's Sija Liu. Sija, good evening.
Good evening, Lena and Bakari. That's right. The battle over bike lanes heating up today. The newest part of this is now a legal challenge, a court challenge against the province's decision to remove bike lanes on a few major roads in the city. Now, this challenge is led by a cycling advocacy group called Cycle Toronto, along with a few other bikers. And it's all centered around a newly passed bill called Bill 212. And this legislation would allow the Ford government to remove bike lanes on Bloor Street, Yonge Street, and University Avenue, three major roads in the city. And this group is now seeking an injunction to stop the removal of those bike lanes. And this bill would also require municipalities to ask the province for permission to install bike lanes that would take away a lane of traffic. Now, the cyclists who are launching this challenge says the new law infringes on their charter rights to life and security for bike riders. Premier Doug Ford, on the other hand, said this will help tackle gridlock in the city and said cyclists can use other roads across the city. And we've been here along the Danforth and Bloor Street. Many of the cyclists that we're seeing are delivery food cyclists. And a lot of the cyclists we're talking to say they may have to reconsider how they get around the city if some of these major bike lanes are removed. Another aspect of this, though, is businesses. Some businesses here on Bloor say they have been negatively impacted by bike lanes. Take a listen to what Balance on Bloor, a group that advocates for businesses, had to say.
We did a survey about a year after, about 11 months after they were installed, and 99 out of 100 businesses were for the removal of the lanes. Most businesses have seen a 30% decline in business. And when we had our annual general meeting, which our city councillor, Andrew Morley, sat in on, she acknowledged that people are down 30%. But then she went on to say, well, don't worry, 6 to 10 years out, the numbers start to swing upwards again, which totally infuriates the businesses because obviously there's not a 30% margin there.
So a lot of different opinions to consider here, Lena and Bakari, from businesses to cyclists and safety on the roads. Back to you.
Okay, CP24, Sija Liu with the latest on bike lanes. Thank you very much. Well, the TTC is citing a software issue for signal problems that have disrupted subway service on Line 1 multiple times over the past 2 weeks.
CP24's Phil Perkins joins us live with more on what the head of the transit agency had to say about this today. Phil, what's the message to riders?
Well, right now, Lena Bakari, the message from interim CEO Greg Percy is that the TTC is on it. They've kind of honed in the issue to be the software that controls the signals across the TTC. There's an issue. He basically compared it to our computers at our newsroom. Basically, sometimes you just have to press the reset button, and that is what had to happen this morning, as well as last night and Monday and last Wednesday. And so they're trying to figure out why this is happening. It's one thing that software has issues, that's just a thing, but they're trying to figure out why out of nowhere they've had this new software controlling the signals on the TTC for about a year and a half now. They're wondering why is this happening and why is it having these issues over the last week or so. And so this latest one shut down all of Line 1 from Vaughan all the way down and around up to Finch. And like many commuters, you get on the subway in the morning. Hopefully it gets you to work on time. You cross your fingers. And in this case, yet again, last week, it didn't happen. So here is interim CEO Greg Percy, as well as someone with the advocate group for commuters, TTC Riders. Here's what they had to say.
We're urgently trying to figure out what the root cause was. We don't have that answer yet. But what we have done is we make sure we have someone available to reboot the system immediately. First time that happened, we actually had to get someone in to do it, our own staff, but they don't stand by. So we are ready in case that happens again while we are doing the root cause analysis. So that is our priority.
We're paying the price today for investments that weren't made in the past. The TTC, the work car issue, there's also an issue of quality control, absolutely. But the other issue is that the TTC wanted to order new subway work cars and then they shelved those plans because they didn't have the funds. And now here we are today with repair equipment that needs to be repaired, subway work cars that are sidelined that should be out doing repair work on the tracks. So that's, we're the lack of investment in past years is catching up with us.
And I asked Greg Percy, is this a staff issue? Do they need to have more boots on the ground in subways, in control rooms to prevent from something like this from happening? And he told me, Bakari and Lena, that it is not a staffing issue. They said it's the software. They just got to figure out why they have this glitch. Back to you.
All right, the latest on the TTC with CP24's Phil Perkins. Phil, thank you. And we're learning more today about a fatal pedestrian collision involving a TTC bus.
At around 8:30 last night, police say a man in his mid-50s exited Ossington subway station and was struck by a bus that had turned right onto Ossington. He was pinned under the right front side of that bus. The man was rushed to a trauma center where he was later pronounced dead. Police have not yet been able to identify him, and they are asking for the public's help. He is described as Asian, 5'4", and about 176 pounds. All right, let's take you live to Queen's Park now. That is where the Premier is speaking to reporters after a meeting with other premiers and the Prime Minister over Donald Trump's proposed tariffs. Let's listen in.
They fulfilled a couple asks, as I mentioned last time I was out here. I mentioned about Health Canada sharing their information about where fentanyl is coming from, where the ingredients are coming from. We're working on that, as well as open communication with other law enforcement between the RCMP, OPP, municipal, and right across the entire province. We asked for more boots on the ground for our CBSA officers and RCMP officers, and they agreed they're going to put more boots on the ground. They asked what the provinces can do to assist. I just want to emphasize the border is the Canadian federal government's responsibility. We will always be there to support. Our OPP are at the ready for any surge capacity if we see coming across our border, and I know the other regions across the country as well. But let's make no mistake about it. As I mentioned to the Prime Minister, the rest of the premiers, we need to be ready. We need to be ready to fight. This fight is coming 100% on January the 20th or January 21st. We don't know what extent this fight's going to go to, but we need to line up everything that we're going to tariff and make sure that the tariff, the money that's coming from these tariffs, don't go into a federal bank account sitting there somewhere. It needs to be immediately distributed right across the province equally, and we'll be able to support the companies, the factories, the workers for any issues that they're facing at the time. So it's a good start. I look forward to having the premiers here. They're rolling in on Sunday. The balance will be here on Monday and Tuesday, and we'll be coming out to speak to the media as well then. And we look forward to a great conversation. We also mentioned to the Prime Minister that we need a follow-up call in the new year, well before President-elect gets sworn in. And I've been working every day talking to as many senators and congresswomen and men and governors, and so are my counterparts. And I just want to thank all the premiers. They're doing incredible work. They're out there communicating with their counterparts, no matter if it's the West Coast or the Maritime provinces, New England states, where we have a full court press going on right now, and I'm very proud of my fellow premiers.
Premier, did the Prime Minister tell you where the $1 billion is going to go, or is it $1 billion for the new gear for the for CBSA, the RCMP, and also as a follow-up, did he give you any details of what where those retaliatory tariffs would be aimed on American goods?
No, Chrystia Freeland's going to put a list together. We're going to put our list together, and I'm sure the other provinces will as well. But we will go to the full extent, depending on how far this goes. We will go to the extent of cutting off their energy, going down to Michigan, going down to New York State, and over to Wisconsin. I don't want this to happen, but my number one job is to protect Ontarians and Canadians as a whole, since we're the largest province.
And on the gear?
On the gear, they're going to enhance gear, get more border patrol, more sniffer dogs, if you want to call them that, patrol dogs. They're going to make sure they have more drones and more opportunities to cover the border. They have asked us, and I have agreed that we will support them. Again, temporarily, as long as it takes to get through this. But again, we emphasize the border is not our responsibility. I'll give you one example, a small police services down in Windsor. What a great group of people down there. CBSA does not have a boat to patrol the water on one of the largest border crossings in Canada. It's the Windsor Police that are going to be doing that. We're going to support them, possibly with a helicopter. I've directed my Solicitor General look at a cost to patrol everywhere from Windsor down to Niagara, and get Niagara and Hamilton a helicopter as well. It's extremely important that we protect our borders.
Could you just go back to what you said on energy? Can you elaborate on what you're envisioning in terms of cutting them off?
Well, let's see what happens as we move forward. But we'll use every tool in our toolbox, including cutting them off energy that we're sending down there. Folks, this is coming. It's not if it is, it's coming. And it's coming January 20th or 21st. And we need to be prepared. We need to stand as a country. We need to stand united as Canadians, and work hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder with our colleagues across the country, and we're ready to do it.
You didn't say anything about retaliatory tariffs on the news today. It was quite a different message you were giving to the Americans than what you're giving right now. Why is that?
Well, we know it's coming, and hopefully it's not going to come as hard as we think. But if he comes out and he mentions that he's going to tariff everything, that's a big problem. It's a big problem for Canadians. It's going to be a big problem for Americans as well. But we will use every tool in our toolbox to fight back. We can't sit back and roll over. We just won't as a country. We never have. And isn't this a shame? Our closest friends and allies. It's amazing when I talk to our colleagues in the U.S. Total different story. They're pro-Canadian, pro-trade with Canadians. So we'll see what happens here.
Did you talk to the Prime Minister about his comments about Americans not electing Kamala Harris and how that was evidence of women's rights being under attack? Do you think that those comments are helpful?
They aren't helpful at all, and yes, it was brought up I'm not going to say who said what, but it was brought up a couple times in our meeting. It's not helpful at all. Donald Trump was elected democratically. If you like him or you don't like him, that's not our issue. We elect Canadians, and it was not helpful whatsoever. And I'm sure Prime Minister got the message loud and clear.
You told us a couple of weeks ago that when tariffs were brought into place the first time around, that it didn't really accomplish anything, that it was kind of a race to the bottom.
That's right.
You're changing your tune today, though. Why are tariffs now a tool that you're going to use, extreme ones as well? Why do you think they'll work this time?
Well, I think he's being a little more aggressive than he was in the past. And I say this respectfully to the president. He's a different type of cat, to say the least. Maybe I'm a different type of cat, but I've never seen not so much aggression, but so matter of fact. He didn't come across this way last time, and it's not helpful for both sides of the border. And, you know, at the end of the day, the consumer gets hurt. Canadians get hurt, but I can assure you one thing, the Americans are going to feel the pain as well. And isn't that unfortunate that that's going to happen? As I've said before, 9 million Americans wake up every single morning to produce parts and products to ship up to Ontario, and that's just Ontario alone. And we're the number one export to 17 states and number 2 to 11 others. But we will be on the phone every single day. Moving forward with our U.S. counterparts, we're going to continue running the ads, the premiers, and they absolutely loved it. They told me they're hearing it from their American counterparts, and I've encouraged all the premiers, and depends on what capacity they have. Some don't have the capacity that we do, to run ads. And if you can't run ads, communicate, fly down there. And I encourage the federal government. Ads work. Ads work on campaigns down in the U.S., and they'll work on our campaign down there, making sure that all Americans hear our voice.
Do you still want to meet with Trump?
Again, if he ever called up and said, sit down, I'd never refuse a meeting with any president. It doesn't matter who it is. I think we have to get our voice heard loud and clear. Things are extremely busy down there, putting people in different positions, a little like any new government. It gets a little hectic at the beginning, but they'll iron it out.
Did you invite the premier from Trump's campaign or his people after appearing on Fox yesterday offering to fly down to Mar-a-Lago? Did anyone contact her?
No, not at all. We want to get this deal moving forward. We want to get this signed. I've made it very clear. We'd prefer to have a bilateral trade deal with the U.S. and a separate one with Mexico. But right now, we're 100% focused on the threats that we're getting through the Trump administration based on putting tariffs and securing our border.
Has your team reached out to the Trump team about going to Mar-a-Lago?
No, they haven't. Not at all.
It sounds like you're pretty confident these tariffs are coming. You don't think this is cluster?
No. He's 100% these tariffs are coming.
And you no longer see Mexico as the bargaining chip here. Because a couple of weeks ago, Mexico was, enemy number one, essentially, but now it's no longer. You guys are kind of.
Oh no, I never think that Mexico is clear on this. They're a problem. It's not the Mexican people. They're really good people. It's when they're importing Chinese goods and slapping into Mexico, slapping on a Made in Mexico sticker, and moving forward. Mexico has a very clear choice. You're either with Beijing or you're with Washington. And I can tell you, Ontario and Canadians, they're with Washington. And that's going to be up to the Mexican president to make a decision, and she'll have to make that decision.
To be clear, Premier, you believe the plan the Premier presented to you today is one that will work, one that will appease Trump. You feel that way?
Well, I think we have to, polish it up a little bit, but it's a very, very good start. I do give their team credit. They came to the table, and like any plan, it evolves as we move forward, and we'll move forward as a collective group across the country. And this is all about Team Canada working together, and I look forward to having the premiers here on Sunday and moving forward. The rest will be here on Monday and Tuesday, and I'll make sure that they're accessible to each and every one of you throughout that whole time. But I just want to thank you for allowing me to come out today and say a few words, and we'll get through this. Maybe a few bumps, but in the long term, we're strong, we're Ontarians, and we're going to get through it. I'm very confident. Thank you, and God bless. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Really, really strong words from the Premier tonight after a meeting with other premiers and the Prime Minister about the threat of tariffs from Donald Trump. Doug Ford says we need to be ready to fight, that the fight is coming, talking about the possibility of retaliatory tariffs tonight. When it comes to energy in states like New York State, Michigan, and Wisconsin, he says he is open to, quote, cutting them off. The premier also says the federal and provincial governments are working to put together lists to counteract, and also noting that his understanding is that there is a plan to beef up our borders. So adding more boots to the ground is also a priority.
And also when it comes to Mexico, he says you're either with Beijing or Washington, and it's clear Canada is with Washington. And, again, to quote the premier, we need to be ready to fight. More on this coming up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, borrowing costs, they are moving lower. This is after another rate cut by the Bank of Canada.
The central bank reduced its key policy rate by 50 basis points, bringing it to 3.25%. It's the fifth straight cut after years of increases. The bank indicated that further cuts would be more gradual, shifting from its previous messaging that continuous easing was needed to support economic growth. And Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem explained today's rate decision and what he's keeping an eye on moving forward.
While the upward and downward pressures on prices have been moderating, risks to the inflation outlook remain. Elevated wage increases combined with weak productivity could push inflation up. Or the economy could keep growing below its potential, which would pull inflation down. In addition, the economic outlook is clouded by the possibility of new tariffs on Canadian exports to the United States. No one knows how this will play out in the months ahead, whether tariffs will be imposed, what exemptions get agreed, or whether retaliatory measures will be taken. This is a major new uncertainty.
And for more on how this jumbo interest rate cut might impact the real estate market, we turn to Tim Hudak, CEO of Tim Hudak Consulting and former CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association. Good to be with you, and thank you for joining us. I'm sure it's been a busy day. What are your key takeaways from this supersized cut, and what is this going to mean for the housing market at large?
Well, I'd say three things. It's welcome. No real surprise. This was expected. So what does it mean for the housing market? Well, variable rates are impacted immediately. The fixed term rates really already anticipated this and are reflecting it today. So no immediate impact on fixed. More importantly, I think this bodes very well for the spring housing market. This means that more buyers will be looking to get into the marketplace. We're late in the season right now. So I suspect at the beginning of 2025, you'll see an early and stronger spring market for housing than we otherwise anticipated.
Okay. Now, also, Tim, I have a bit of a loaded question here for you. How does this change the game for those people looking to, sell a condo that they used as an investment property, or if those people are wanting to buy a condo, given that the market is pretty saturated?
So on the condo side, it's a lot more challenging. You use the term saturation. There's a lot of condos, currently that are on the market. However, in the longer term, not many new ones are being built, right? So you can actually get into the market today, and you're looking for a longer term investment, I would get with your realtor and look at that option. Here's the bottom line for those who are looking to get into the housing market. We really need the governments to do two things. Number one, we've got to build more homes. We just don't have enough inventory, and we have fallen behind. So getting more homes built, particularly for first-time buyers, and then move-up buyers when the kids come along. And number two, at a national level, really it's time to get rid of the stress test. It is no longer needed. Even if interest rates come down and mortgage rates come down with them, you still have 2 points on top of that. And that is particularly punishing for young families trying to get their first home. So we've had it for a while when the market was highly pressured. It doesn't make sense in 24, 25. I'd love to see this happen at the federal government. Get rid of that stress test now.
Okay, I hear you on that. Can you put things into perspective for us? The central bank announcing a 50 basis point cut. What does that mean for the average person trying to re-enter the market? How much relief does that provide?
Yeah, so it's going to impact in several ways depending on where you are. So if you have a variable rate mortgage or you're looking at that, there's an immediate impact. That's tied to the overnight rate that was lowered to 3.25% today. If you're financing things, you've got a line of credit on your home, a car, credit cards, right? There's downward pressure now on those rates. So it gives people already pretty overburdened in this affordability crisis a little bit of breathing room from the chokehold that they have been in. Fixed rates usually anticipate where the market is going to go, and they reflect what happens with bonds. So really right now, you should work with your financial advisor. You can find good fixed rates over 5 years, in the 4s somewhere. I also worry about uncertainty. What's going to happen with the trade war with the U.S. The economy was shaky. That's one of the reasons why we saw this decrease today. Will it remain shaky into 2025? What can we do about it? I'll repeat it. Get rid of that stress test to give people some room to breathe. And secondly, we just got to get building more homes that are going to help people get their leg up in the housing market.
All right,
Supply.
Yeah, Tim Hudak, CEO of Tim Hudak Consulting and former CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. It's now 5:56, 2 degrees. You're watching Live at 5.
The TTC is getting in the holiday spirit. We'll take a look at the TTC holiday train next.
The TTC is getting into the holiday spirit.
This year's holiday train was unveiled at Davisville Station. The fully decorated car will run along Line 1 throughout the holiday season. Santa's elves will hand out candy canes to children during their travels.
It is now 5:59, 2 degrees. You're watching Toronto's breaking news, CP24. Tough comments from Premier Doug Ford today, telling Ontario residents that tariffs are 100% coming. He also says that Ontario is prepared to fight back. We're live at Queen's Park tonight with the very latest.